pretty tight relationship with my grandfather. It's more of an unspoken relationship. When I was a kid, I got on the school bus here every day. You know, I got dropped off here every day, spent weekends here. He was always into carpentry too, but we went back to the bush, cut wood. He wasn't hunting when I grew up hunting. I never really hunted with him. It wasn't really until I bought this place from my grandparents that I knew he was into duck hunting when, you know, you stumble across an old decoy that's 25 years old and it, you know, didn't make a difference then, but it makes a difference now knowing the brand and, oh God, that's, you know, a lot older than I remember any decoys. And old calls and old shotgun shells, you know, you see an old lead shotgun shell, you're thinking, how old's that? Because I don't even remember shooting lead. I had a pretty tight relationship, but it was more I had to find out on my own what he was about. My name's Cory Alkerton. I'm 30 years old. I'm from Spencerville, Ontario, Canada. I've been a hunter and trapper my entire life, and thankfully I get to do that for a living, being a hunting guide and working for my family business as a trapper. My father, he's a licensed carpenter, and so was my brother, so naturally I grew up around woodworking. I guess that's how I kind of stumbled across using a lathe. I was pretty young, always wanted to turn baseball bats, anything I could on a lathe. Naturally, getting into duck hunting, you want to make your own calls. I grew up hunting and trapping with my father, and we mainly hunted big game. I didn't get into hunting small game or waterfowl until I was about 14 or 15, and once I started duck hunting, it pretty much ate up all my time. Every weekend, any chance I could get, I was duck hunting. Spending, you know, most of my childhood here, I knew the property. I didn't really know what 15 years down the road it would be something more to me. You know, I just played through the bush and stuff. You know, when he passed away, it was, you know, hard for my grandmother to look after this, so I moved in with her, you know, looked after her and looked after the property. You gain knowledge of the property, you know, this just isn't a tree. This is, you know, a different type of tree. Oh, I can make a duck call out of this, but, you know, I can make a duck decoy out of this. Basswood is good for duck decoys. Cherry, maple, that's good for duck calls, you know. Softwoods, hardwoods, you learn about that. 3-4 years ago, you know, I was gonna cut my own wood, get it milled down, and I do, but I went up in the barn mow. I stumbled across all this wood. I'd seen it when I was a kid, and again, I walked by it, you know, played in that barn mow, but I never knew I would, you know, it's a big pile of wood to me. Didn't know it was a big pile of cherry that I could, you know, make stuff of. And I'd said to my dad, you know, I'm gonna try building stuff out of this cherry, and I think I'm gonna make some duck calls. So it's 2016. I thought, okay, you know, I'm gonna put my time in to make my own call. It's winter time, but in the following fall, I gotta go back to Saskatchewan to guide. And I wanted something I could take there, hunt with for 8 weeks, every day. You know, something's gonna last. Something that sounds good, it's gonna kill your ducks. From there forward, it took basically all winter to make a call, a lot of different tries at it, and make a call that sounds good, that I would hunt with. You know, it didn't have to look good at this point. I just wanted something I could hunt with. You know, I got the wood. First thing I gotta do is, you know, get a blank cut. Cut it down, maybe plane it if I have to, you know, get it good and square. Mark center, that way it sits center on the lathe. And then once you start turning it, you turn it to a perfect circle. And from there, you gotta drill it out, which is probably what I didn't know when I started making calls, one of the most important parts. You know, when you're drilling them out, you gotta make sure it's, you know, drilled perfect for length of your tone channel. So having the right size bits, kind of generic, everybody kind of uses the same size. And I mean, looking at other call makers, you know, I've had plenty of duck calls. You start looking at theirs. Now it's probably the best part of turning is when you get to finally let your imagination take over and start shaping the call. You can, you know, make room for inlays, you can use wire burns, And yeah, it's pretty much getting into the final stages of the call. The sanding, the finishing process is a huge part of it. But then the toughest part is getting a sound out of the call. You can have the best looking call in the world. If it doesn't make a sound, it's not worth nothing. Every call maker has their own jig, and it's their own sound, you know, and you can buy jigs that they've made, but it kind of defeats the purpose of making your own duck call. If I want to make my own duck call, I want it to be my own sound. So I made 2 calls, and I took a bunch of reeds and hoped that I wouldn't break a call, because wood's notorious for breaking. I wanted to make my calls to last, so I said, well, I'm only going to take 2 calls out there, and they're going to last me. So, and it did. It was 6,000-7,000 birds later. They lasted, so it's been going on for the last couple of years now. They always get a little better. I get a little better at turning calls and get a little better at making them sound right. So it's a steady learning curve from 2016 on. So I have 3 or 4 different jigs made now, but it probably took, I don't even want to know how many messed up inserts to make that jig, you know. Every call I make is something I would use in the field the same way. So it was a lot of work to get there, like a lot. I make calls that have kind of an old school look to them. When I make a call, it's oil finish, wax finish. I do inlays, copper inlays, leather inlays, bamboo, cord inlays, like different stuff like that, you know, that makes the call its own, you know, like different than what other people make. And some people give me wood. They say, hey, my grandfather had this chunk of wood laying in his barn, you know, I'd like to make a duck call in his honor. So I make it out of that. I've turned calls out of old barn board, and you have to put epoxy in them to make them solid. So doing stuff like that, you're getting 100% custom beginning to end call, which is, you know, a little bit different than anybody else really does. But with my grandfather, it was more just about being in the bush, cutting wood and stuff, and that's where it kind of entails into making calls. You're just not buying a piece of wood from the store. You're making duck calls from something you grew or you looked after, and you manage this property, you look after the bush. To me, it's pretty cool being able to use some of the stuff he left me. You'd like to think he left me this stuff to use for, you know, what I wanted to do down the road. It's like he knew what I was gonna do, but I didn't. I can make duck calls for a lifetime, and I'll probably never use up all that wood. So.